The summer heat in Western Virginia had retreated not with a cooling breeze, but a sudden, suffocating dampness. It was the kind of climate that rotted things from the inside out, and my grandfather's inherited farmhouse was the perfect casualty. I called it a fixer-upper. Rin, my cousin and reluctant summer resident, called it a structural liability wrapped in a mold spore. We'd moved in mid-July. Rin, a wiry guy with an insatiable appetite for niche documentaries and zero construction skills, was my cheap labor. I lacked the money for professionals, he lacked the motivation to find a real job. It was a perfect, mutually depressing arrangement. The house itself was a misery, the porch sagged like a broken spine, the wiring was a fire waiting to happen, and the pervasive mildew smell was a foundational truth, impervious to bleach, ozone generators, or prayers. It was the scent of forgotten water and slow, inevitable decay. By late October, the boredom was a physical entity. We had devoured every movie and podcast. The internet was a cruel joke. A single flickering bar of 3G only available if you stood on a specific floorboard in the living room, holding your phone like a supplicant worshipping a technological deity. We were getting dangerously bored, the kind of boredom that makes bad ideas shimmer with irresistible possibility. The Marlo Place entered our lives on a Tuesday night. Rin was, as usual, hunched over his laptop, which was precariously balanced on a stack of damp architectural magazines. He was deep diving into a hyper-local Virginia message board, the kind populated by three-figure conspiracy theorists and retirees arguing about property lines. "You ever hear of the Marlo Place?" he asked, not looking up. The name felt heavy, like a stone dropped in still water. He'd found a comment thread dedicated to local abandoned sites. The Marlo Place was mentioned as a footnote, a farmhouse that had been empty since the early 80s. The detail that stuck with me was the quiet exit. The family just left one day. No fire, no public tragedy, no estate sale. They just ceased to be residents. The road leading to it had long since been surrendered to the woods, a testament to its intentional solitude. It didn't appear on Google Maps, it was a ghost on the grid. Rin framed it as casual urban exploration. He was already mentally narrating the documentary. We just check it out. Get some footage. Could be fun. I was already arguing with myself. I didn't want the reputation of being the guy who backed out due to weird vibes, but the house's name carried a specific kind of local gravity, like a warning you absorb with the regional air. We had nothing better to do. That was the real horror. We left just after the last gas station blinked off its open sign, turning onto a barely there dirt path. The truck bounced and scraped over rocks, the undercarriage groaning in protest. The air grew immediately colder, a deep, pervasive chill that had nothing to do with the outside temperature. When we stopped, the Marlo Place was a suggestion, not a structure, barely visible through a thicket of dead, skeletal trees. It was one of those houses where the surrounding forest hadn't just grown around it, it had actively tried to swallow it whole. The porch was half collapsed, its railing bound by thick, coiling vines that looked less like plant life and more like engorged, sleeping veins. It looked less like an abandoned building and more like an abandoned photograph, bleached of color and life. We climbed the porch with exaggerated care. Each board flexed, sinking under our weight, but held with a disconcerting resilience. Rin pushed the front door. It didn't creak, didn't stick. It simply swung inward, silent and heavy, like it had never been properly latched since the Marlo family left. The air inside was a physical presence, stale, thick and absolutely still. There was no draft, no rustle of leaves inside, no scurrying of unseen animals. Just a suffocating quiet. The smell was the worst part, a chemical mix of wet dust, crumbling drywall, and that eternal mildew, underscored by something subtly metallic like old copper coins. The first floor was a blank slate of misery. The wallpaper had curled away from the lath like sun-dried parchment. The floors were warped by decades of moisture intrusion. There were no ghosts of life left. No books, no furniture, no photographs, just negative space where a life had been carefully erased. Rin, ignoring the atmosphere, pulled out his audio recorder. "First floor entry, visible signs of structural damage," he narrated, his voice unnaturally loud in the silence. "No recent occupancy. Smell suggests mildew, possibly black mold." He was performing, but his eyes, darting into the deep shadows, betrayed a genuine nervous excitement. In a hallway closet he found a pile of old, stiff photo albums, most empty. One had a handwritten note on the inside cover, October '79, last autumn at home. The pages inside were empty save for a few faded, ambiguous stains. The main event was upstairs. The first two bedrooms were stripped bare. The third, in the far back, was different. It still contained a single yellowed, sagging mattress directly on the floor, the kind of mattress that feels heavy with implied suffering. But it was the wall above it that stopped me cold. It was covered in crayon drawings. Not the cheerful scribbles of childhood, but something meticulous and disturbing. They were all the same motif: hands, dozens of them. Long, wide, with exaggerated, tapering fingers. No arms, just the black fingers stretching down from the crown molding, giving the impression that they were crawling out of the ceiling itself. I stood there staring. It wasn't simple fear, it was a profound, cold discomfort. The drawings didn't look like they had been drawn. They looked like they had been left there, like residual evidence of a silent, slow event. I felt a sudden, desperate urge to leave. "Rin, stop recording," I muttered. He laughed, assuming I was joking. "Come on man, I'm getting gold here." Multiple handprints, uniform design, symbolic location suggests child's bedroom. "I'm serious. Stop." He ignored me, circling the room. He was mid-sentence when he just stopped talking. His head snapped up and he looked at me, his eyes wide and vacant. "I think someone just went downstairs," he whispered. We froze, lungs locked up. We hadn't heard a door latch or a floorboard creak. Yet the air, already heavy, grew pressurized, the shift so subtle it was more felt than heard. It was as if the house had just taken a breath it intended to hold forever. I silently clicked off my headlamp. Total, suffocating darkness. Then from the floor below it came. A sound, sharp, low, and distinctly mechanical. Bzzzt. It was close, not loud, and impossible to place at first. Ren leaned toward the stairwell. "Is that clippers?" The noise came again. Bzzzt. Closer. The dread became a cold, paralyzing weight. I started backing toward the hallway, but it was too late. In the faint spill of ambient light from the front windows, we saw him. A figure standing at the bottom of the stairs, unmoving. He was too tall, too stiff, his posture wrong. His face was swallowed by shadow, but his right hand was raised, holding something metallic. My flashlight beam, shaking uncontrollably, caught just enough detail. A pair of hair clippers. He flicked them on again. Bzzzt. Louder. Then he started walking up. Not fast, not aggressive, but with a terrifying, deliberate calm. Each step was measured, and the high-pitched whine of the clippers grew louder, biting into the silence. I grabbed Ren and yanked him back. We threw ourselves into the far bedroom, the one with the handprints. We slammed the door and fumbled the cheap metal latch into place, a futile gesture that offered no real protection. "There's a closet," Ren gasped, his voice a strained wire. We jammed ourselves into the small, musty space, pulling the door shut. The slats in the wood gave us a perfect, terrifying view of the bedroom. The bedroom door creaked open. The man walked in. He was wearing a mundane, bright red Arizona Cardinals jersey. The detail was jarring, a splash of unsettling reality in the middle of a nightmare. He didn't search the room. He walked straight up to the crayon drawings and simply stared at the multitude of black hands. The clippers stopped. The silence rushed back in, broken only by our frantic breathing. He stood there for a long second, then spoke. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, yet devoid of human inflection. "Let me clean it up just a little." He raised the clippers, pressed them against the wall, and began shaving the plaster. Slow, deliberate strokes, the blades chewing into the paint and sheetrock. The sound was horrifyingly mundane. Bzzz. Bzzz. White dust drifted down like grotesque dander. He repeated the phrase, a quiet, psychotic mantra. "Just a little. Let me clean it up. Just a little." The sight of the monstrous, ritualistic act broke my paralysis. I kicked the closet door open, pushed Ren out, and we sprinted. Down the stairs, not touching the railings, trusting only momentum. We burst out the front door, hitting the gravel road, not stopping to see if the figure followed. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs seized up. We didn't exchange a word until we were miles away, and even then only a shaky silence. I called a realtor the next afternoon, putting the house on the market immediately. Ren packed his bags 2 days later. The Marlo Place had shown us something about its nature. It wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was occupied by a laborer obsessed with meticulous, final cleanup. The Carver was coming for the mess, and the house was his workshop. The air that night in Wilmer, Arkansas, was sharp and thin, holding the first real bite of autumn. It was Halloween, and we were parked way up past the main logging roads, where the Ozark Hills start turning into real mountains. The fire pit we'd left a half-mile back was the last sign of civilized warmth. The cold settled into our bones quickly, fighting the cheap whiskey we'd been passing around since sundown. There were 5 of us: me, my cousin Ryan, whose family trailer was our base of operations, Ryan's girlfriend Lexi, who was tightly wound even before the alcohol, my friend Joel, who compensated for nervous energy with relentless, loud jokes, and Caleb. Caleb was Lexi's friend, a recent addition to our circle. He was a mystery, a quiet guy with an unreadable, still face who sipped his drink slowly and watched the fire like he was waiting for a specific cosmic alignment. We tried to pull him into our routine, the trash talk, the terrible ghost stories, but he was a stone. He simply observed. Somewhere around 11 p.m., when the bottle was nearly dry and the boredom was taking hold, the Darnell house came up. If you grew up anywhere near Wilmer, you knew the legend of Everett Darnell, the man who built the house in the 1950s with a custom stone basement and hand-laid tile. The man who had lived there alone, descended into his basement one day, and vanished without a trace. He left his wallet, his keys, his running truck. Everything. The police found nothing. The neighbors heard nothing. The town eventually stopped talking about it like a mystery and started treating it like a geographical warning. The house sat abandoned in a thick, forgotten pocket of trees a mile past the ridge. Locals claimed they heard dragging noises, faint voices, or the sharp, phantom smell of pipe smoke if they got too close. We were tipsy, bored, and armed with inadequate flashlights. That was enough. The hike was jarring. My boots crunched through the dry leaves, and the air held a hollow, breathless quality, like the entire area was holding its breath. The whiskey, initially a shield, was starting to wear off, leaving my fingertips stinging. Even Joel, usually a machine gun of forced commentary, was silent. Caleb walked at the rear, his hood still up, his flashlight beam pointed deliberately low at his feet. He didn't seem to acknowledge the house until we were standing directly in front of it. The Darnell house wasn't imposing, but it was wrong. 2 stories of pale blue siding, now faded to a sickly gray and peeling at the edges. The roof sagged in the middle, and the entire structure tilted, as if it were constantly attempting to escape the spot it was built on. It looked like a condemned museum built for someone shorter than we were. The front door was barely attached to the frame, shielded by an old screen door hanging from a single hinge. Someone, likely a bored local teenager, had spray-painted a sloppy, dripping red pentagram across the wood. I was the first to step across the threshold. The cold that hit me inside was different. Cellar cold, heavy and damp, settling instantly in the spine. The air smelled of wet rot and excavated dirt. The floorboards complained loudly under my weight, each creak demanding a pause. The ceiling felt oppressively low, and the whole interior maintained that nauseating slant, an architectural lie that played tricks on my equilibrium. We wandered through the main floor like tourists in a disaster zone. The living room, the dining room, the tiny hallway leading to the bedrooms upstairs. The walls were mostly stripped to bare boards. The remaining scraps of wallpaper curled like old, brittle skin. Ryan and Joel tried to keep up the pretense of a fun scare, but their jokes sounded forced and brittle. Lexi stuck close to Ryan, her hand glued to his jacket. Caleb, however, was in his element. He moved slowly, deliberately, pausing at each doorway. I watched him stand perfectly still in one of the tiny bedrooms, his low-powered flashlight beam fixed on the window, waiting for the glass to deform or the shape outside to resolve itself. He wasn't scared, he was expectant. I drifted toward the kitchen, which had been mostly gutted, empty counters, a chipped sink and broken tiles. But one detail stopped me dead. All the cabinet doors were open, not hanging loose or half ajar. Every single door, upper and lower across the entire kitchen, was open to a perfect 90-degree angle. Some of the hinges were visibly rusted, having been locked in place for decades, yet they were all arranged like this, as if someone had deliberately gone through and posed them. It felt less like a hurried exit and more like a bizarre, silent arrangement. I didn't touch anything. Then I saw the basement door. It was tucked neatly between the fridge space and the back wall, and it was firmly shut. But a narrow sliver of yellowish, sickly light, thin as a paper cut, was spilling out from underneath. I figured one of the others, maybe Caleb, had gone down to set up a cheap jump scare. "Hey, you down there?" I called out, turning around. That's when I realized I couldn't hear anyone anymore. No voices, no footsteps, no distant creak from the floor above. Just silence. It wasn't the natural absence of sound, it was a physical wrongness, like a vacuum had suddenly sucked the house hollow. Convinced I was being messed with, I grabbed the tarnished metal knob of the basement door, twisted it, and pulled. The heavy wood groaned in protest. I stepped inside and started down. The stairs were narrow, steep, and felt older than the rest of the house. The light I'd seen came from a single bare bulb hanging precariously by a wire from the ceiling. It swung slightly, casting slow, heavy shadows across the stone walls. The basement was not just a cellar, it was a crypt. Wide open concrete floor, four thick, rough-hewn stone walls, and nothing else. But something had been busy. Near the far wall, the concrete was covered in long, jagged scratches. They weren't patterned or symmetrical, just angry, desperate-looking grooves, as if someone had dragged something metallic across the floor over and over again, trying to dig or tear their way out with brute, panicked force. My dread was now a churning nausea, but I was focused on the scratches when the bulb popped. It wasn't a slow flicker. It was a tiny, sudden flash, followed by total, instantaneous darkness. My heart hammered so hard it rang in my ears. I immediately clicked on my flashlight, the beam shaking uncontrollably as it bounced off the rough stone. I spun around, ready to bolt up the stairs when I heard it, breathing. Slow, even, but unnervingly close. And it wasn't coming from the direction of the stairs. It was directly behind me. I whipped the flashlight beam toward the far corner, scanning the stone walls and the ravaged concrete. My beam fell upon something impossibly wrong. A small, blackened wooden door low to the ground tucked into the far wall. It was so flush with the stone that I could swear it had not been there moments before. It looked like it had been soaked in oil, and it had no handle, only a heavy rusted latch on the outside. And the latch was pulled back. The door was open, but barely, just a narrow sliver of blackness. That darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It was an absolute, depthless void. The light from my flashlight, which brightly illuminated everything else, seemed to refuse to enter that gap. It looked heavy. It looked hungry. I froze, locked in place. My feet began moving before my brain could process the terror, backing away one agonizing step at a time. The flashlight beam stayed fixed on the impossible door. Then, without sound, no creak of the hinge, no grind of wood, the door moved wider, only an inch, but deliberately, confirming my sanity. And from the blackness came the sound I'd heard before, now amplified by the chamber. A slow, rhythmic dragging sound, metal on stone. I turned and ran. Instinct took over. There was no thought of warning anyone. I scrambled up the narrow stairs, my feet doubling their length with panic. I slammed the heavy basement door shut behind me, the walls of the house shaking with the impact. I stumbled into the empty kitchen, still no sound, still no people. I tore through the house, frantically checking room after room. They were empty. I burst out onto the porch, ready to scream, and stopped. There they were. Ryan, Lexi, Joel, and Caleb. All four of them, standing out in the yard, silent and still, looking not at me but slightly past me like they had been waiting out there the entire night. What the hell? I gasped, dizzy with panic. I was in there for 10 minutes. You guys were right behind me. Lexi slowly turned, her expression unreadable. You went in by yourself, she said. Right when you crossed the threshold, something felt wrong. We heard you yell once. That was it. We never even stepped inside. I looked down at the dusty porch boards. There were 4 sets of footprints at the base of the steps, all facing in. But on the porch itself, there was only one clear set of boot prints going in and none coming out. I didn't remember walking back to the porch. I didn't remember leaving the house at all. I only remembered the door that looked hungry and the silence that preceded the dragging sound. Something had happened in that 10 minutes of silence. The Darnell house wasn't just haunted, it was a collector, and it had taken something from me that night. We left immediately. Caleb moved to Arizona a month later, gone without a goodbye, his quiet face now the face of a memory I couldn't trust. That year, Halloween landed on a Friday, and the air was thick with Mason's anticipation. Every old barn, every hollowed-out church, every abandoned logging trail held a story for him, but this year, his obsession had settled on one place like a consuming sickness: the Bramble House. Mason wasn't your typical thrill-seeker. He was a dedicated occult archivist, spending hours digging through old forums, microfiche from the local library, and faded county records. He didn't just want to scare. He wanted to prove the existence of a specific ancient malice. The legend of the Bramble House was perfect. Built quickly, and its first residents, a farming family, vanished before the first spring, leaving the house behind like an angry, solitary monument. Every person who tried to occupy it afterward either fled in terror or returned irrevocably broken, muttering phrases like, "It's not alone anymore," or, "There's something in the walls." One man walked 15 miles barefoot in the snow, returned completely silent, and never spoke again. Mason believed certain places actively pushed back against memory and life. He theorized the Bramble House consumed sound, emotion, and history itself. The energy changes after dark, man. On Halloween the veil is thin. We have to be there, he argued, his eyes bright with conviction. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I believed in Mason's momentum. He had a way of pulling people over the line. So, when he said we should go, I put up a half-hearted fight, but ultimately I said yes. We left just after 8 p.m. We looked normal, hoodies, jeans, boots, ready for mud, not terror. Mason carried a backpack containing snacks, a cheap, dependable flashlight, and his beloved handheld recorder, his instrument for documenting findings. I carried only my phone, which was already sputtering at 50% battery, and the pocket knife my uncle gave me. The drive was short, but the walk took 40 minutes. We parked the Honda at the end of a logging trail that had long since been decommissioned. The moon was nearly full, casting enough light to navigate the treacherous path of exposed roots and loose stones. When we crested the ridge, the outline of the Bramble House hit me with a profound internal thud. It was barely standing. The back roof had entirely caved in, creating a dark, toothless gap. The porch leaned so far to the right it looked like a strong wind would peel it off completely. One window on the front was shattered, the glass shards hanging inward like curved claws. The entire structure bowed, giving the terrifying impression that the house had exhaled too hard and never managed to pull itself back into shape. I felt a tightening in my chest. Not adrenaline-fueled fear, but a cold, heavy sense of crossing a threshold into a place that actively rejected me. Mason didn't hesitate. He walked straight up the steps, which groaned ominously, and pushed the front door open. He entered with the confidence of a man returning to his own property. I lagged a few feet behind, rationalizing that I was watching for squatters, but really, I just didn't want to be the one to cross that line first. The air inside was shockingly quiet. It wasn't dead silence, it was a listening quiet. A heavy, stale stillness that felt like a sound itself. The front room was surprisingly intact, with dusty furniture shoved against the walls, a broken chair near the fireplace, and a wooden bench under the window. Mason was immediately at work. He pulled out his recorder and started narrating in a dramatic whisper. October 31st, 2024. Location Bramble House. Structural integrity fair. I sat on the wooden bench, which groaned under my weight, and decided I'd kill time by scrolling my phone. But the house wouldn't allow idleness. It creaked, not from wind or our weight, but with an internal sound like old bones shifting in their sleep. I heard a muffled sound from deeper within and thought it was Mason laughing, but the sound felt stretched out, thin and wrong. After maybe 10 minutes I called out, "Mason." Nothing. I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. I figured it was his usual trick. He'd hide and wait for me to panic. I stood up and followed the direction he'd gone into the next room. The temperature dropped immediately, a sudden, sharp chill that clung to my skin like static. This room was dedicated to its own bizarre purpose. The walls were covered in strange marks, lines, circles, and weird geometric loops, some drawn in chalk, others smudged like someone had tried to wipe them away in a panic. In each corner, someone had made little, non-random piles of pebbles, stacked and arranged, like someone had been halfway through a meticulous, silent ritual. Still no sign of Mason. I moved deeper, eventually reaching the remnants of a staircase, most of the steps long rotted away. I leaned around the broken banister and shouted, "Mason! Come on, this isn't funny." That's when I heard it, a slow, soft dragging scrape on the warped wood floor, like a blanket or a hand being pulled. Then the sound that shattered my perception. I didn't hear a whisper with my ears, I felt it in my chest. A physical pressure, a low thrumming that felt like a recognition deep inside my body. My skin broke out in goosebumps. I nearly tripped over a pile of pebbles. I pulled out my phone, 1% battery. It had been mostly charged when we left. I tried to text Mason, but the screen froze. Then I saw it. Something, was standing just inside the next doorway. It was taller than any man, impossibly thin. Its body was angled wrong, the spine leaning as if it couldn't hold itself upright. It wore no clothing, but its skin was a terrifying contradiction. Dry and taut like parchment, yet shiny like polished, dark wax. "Mason," I choked out, my brain desperately trying to assign a name to the monstrous shape. The thing twitched its head toward me, a fast, sharp, unnatural movement. Then it began to move. Not lunging, not running, but a terrifyingly slow, deliberate walk, as if it were allowing me the painful seconds to register its approach. I ran. Survival instinct took over. I sprinted back toward the front room, heart hammering against my ribs, feet sliding on the warped floor. I risked a glance back near the doorway and the thing was gone. But the front room had fundamentally changed. There had been one bench under the window, now there were two. The chair near the fireplace was gone. And one of the benches had a fresh, pale splinter along the seat, starkly visible against the aged wood as if someone, or something, had just stood up from it with tremendous, sudden force. I stumbled outside and yelled Mason's name, but my voice was swallowed by the surrounding woods. My panic was now total. I ran down the path without stopping. I didn't call the police. I couldn't explain the chair, the splinter, or the silent walker. Mason didn't return. His car was found parked under the trees. The sheriff's search came back quiet. His mother only knew he was gone. His body was never found. Last Halloween, a warning was spray painted on the road leading up the ridge in giant red letters. Don't wake it again. I believe them now. The Bramble House didn't just consume Mason. It consumed the memory of the room he was in and the piece of wood he was sitting on, leaving behind only the terrifying, silent proof of its immaculate appetite. We drove out toward Clayton, Georgia on a late Halloween night. The four of us, me, Brennan, his cousin Lacey, and her perpetually detached boyfriend Marcus, were seniors clinging to the final strange months before the adult world claimed us. We weren't interested in costumes or candy, we were drawn to the dark gravity of forgotten places. Tonight it was the Ridge House. Brennan, who had spent every summer visiting his uncle's cabin a half-mile away, was our guide and main evangelist. He called the Ridge House a rite of passage, a local legend supposedly abandoned since the late 60s after the youngest daughter of the family drowned in a well. They left everything, furniture, clothes, life, and never returned. We parked at the end of a barely visible trail, near a faded marker that looked more like a snapped bone than a signpost. The rest of the journey was a steep 15-minute climb through dense, scratching pine trees. When the woods abruptly opened into the clearing, the first thing that struck me was the silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was dead quiet. No wind rustling the brittle leaves, no buzzing insects, no sound of life at all. The air felt pressurized, too still, as if the landscape itself was holding its breath. The house was not large, but it was profoundly wrong. It had slouched to one side as if tired of standing, and the wood was dry and gray. The porch, barely hanging on, sagged in the middle, and one of the supporting columns had cracked completely. There was no proper front door, just a gaping hole with splintered wood, like the entrance to a wound. Brennan, driven by nervous excitement, shouldered his way in. The inside air hit us hard, dry, cold, and strangely neutral, a smell of old and used air rather than typical rot. The furniture was still there, draped in dusty, colorless floral sheets, giving the unsettling impression that someone had frozen a normal life halfway through a preservation attempt. The stairs to the second floor were a tight, groaning spiral to the left. We split up. Brennan headed toward the kitchen in the back. Lacey and Marcus, who looked increasingly uneasy, lingered near the base of the staircase. I drifted down a narrow hallway to the left, which ended at what looked like an old back office or study. The moment I stepped inside, my phone glitched. Full signal, but the screen locked, the camera wouldn't open, and the text messages froze on an unsent, "Are you okay?" I tried rebooting and the screen got stuck on the loading spiral. On the far wall of the office, I focused on a faint rectangular outline where a painting had once hung. As I stared, that strange, internal pressure returned, tightening my chest, making the air feel heavy. Then I blinked, and for a fraction of a second she was there. A woman standing with her back to me in a brown dress with short black hair. Not a shadow, not a blur, just there and then instantly gone. I whipped around, heart pounding. Nothing. That's when I noticed it, set flush into the wooden floor, a small square door maybe 3 feet across. The wood looked dry and sealed, and traced over it in faded chalk was a symbol. A circle with intersecting lines, intentional and deliberate. As I leaned my foot slightly onto the trapdoor, the nausea hit and my entire body instinctively pulled back. A loud, primal, "Nope, not down there." I backed out of the office, the air immediately returning to normal. I called out for Brennan, but my voice felt muffled. I found him at the foot of the stairs, staring upward. "Lacey and Marcus?" I asked. "They went up," he whispered, his eyes distant. "But they're not up there." We went up the spiral stairs, which moaned with a sudden, unsettling loudness. The second floor was a long, dark hallway. The first 2 rooms were empty. The third, however, told a different story. The room was bare, but the floorboards were covered in prints, dozens of small, bare footprints. They started at the far wall, led to the window, and then doubled back, over and over. The profound dread was this: there were no footprints leading out of the room. Then I heard Lacey. She wasn't screaming. She was talking. Quietly. Calmly. Telling someone a story. I looked around the room. Empty. "It's below us," I whispered, the realization chilling me. Under the floor. I could feel a faint heat through the soles of my shoes. Brennan, his face drawn tight, said, "They're in the crawl space." That's when we found the entrance. In the hallway, a floorboard looked newer, cleaner than the others. We leveraged it open with a pocket knife, revealing a shallow hole. Inside, a little girl's rotted, stiff blue dress, a broken pair of eyeglasses, and something wrapped tightly in cloudy plastic. But before we could investigate, a muffled voice, this time clearly Brennan's, called out from the far wall, "Guys." Not scared, just confused. He was standing by the corner where the wall looked slightly uneven. Brennan pointed at a seam in the drywall near the floor. He tore at it, revealing a hidden, tight opening. "This is it," he muttered. "The crawl space." He disappeared inside without another word. I was left with Lacey's flashlight. Then a sound from under the floor returned, Lacey's calm, quiet talking. I followed Brennan. The space wasn't a crawl space. It was a descent into a chamber, a circular, brick-walled room maybe 10 feet wide and 8 feet tall, with a dirt floor. A single, bare light bulb, seemingly hooked to nothing, glowed brightly, shattering the house's perpetual darkness. Lacey and Marcus were in the far corner. Marcus was slumped against the wall, eyes closed, perfectly still, like a battery had been removed. Lacey stood facing the wall, her eyes wide, staring past me. "You're not supposed to be down here," she whispered, her voice devoid of urgency. I tried to pull Marcus, but he was dead weight. Then Brennan, appearing behind me, walked straight past us, knelt by the brick wall, and started digging with his bare hands into the dirt. His fingers shredded, dark earth mixing with bright blood, but he was oblivious, utterly consumed by the frantic, silent task. Lacey shrieked, a raw, real sound that cut through the chamber's oppressive quiet. She tore away from my grasp and scrambled up the ladder. I didn't hesitate. I threw Marcus over my shoulder, climbing out into the hallway. I ran until I hit the gravel road, Lacey vomiting in the ditch, Marcus slowly coming to, muttering about the woman under the house. Brennan never came out. We called the police. We told them about the house, the prints, the well, and the hidden chamber. They found the house and the bundle. It was a decades-old baby monitor. But they searched for 2 days and came back quiet. The crawl space collapsed, the sheriff said. There's nothing but a foundation and beams above the second floor. No chamber, no ladder, no attic. They showed me the blueprints. The blueprints were blank above the second floor. I knew what I saw. I knew what I climbed into. The Ridge House was not just a cursed place. It was a structure that could lie. It could rearrange its own architecture to erase evidence. Brennan's life was not lost in a chamber. It was removed from reality. Marcus changed his number. Lacey moved to Oregon. I stopped going out on Halloween. The most terrifying truth was that the Ridge House had not disappeared. It was still there, a living, lying structure, ready to collect the next curious soul, erasing the blueprints of its dark heart with every new victim. The town of Oak Ridge, Georgia, barely qualified as a spot on the map, a quiet, forgotten place where the only establishment still flickering at 10 p.m. was the gas station. It was Halloween and I was staying with my cousin Emery. I was 2 years younger than her friends, the designated tag-along, but that night I was also the most sober. The air held a brittle cold, a contrast to the fiery, cheap cinnamon whiskey we were passing around behind the old baseball field. It burned going down, tasting of melted red hots and regret, but it delivered that necessary warm, numb feeling, the one that tells you nothing bad ever really happens to people like you. There were 3 of Emery's older friends. Benji, a loud-mouthed dare addict, Lana, whose silence usually meant she was observing something unpleasant, and Emery herself, who kept glancing at me, silently begging me not to call attention to her nervousness. The boredom, however, was as potent as the alcohol. That's when Benji, in his element, leaned in with the promise of something real. "I know a house," he slurred. "Not just a house, the one up past the caved-in mining trails. The foreman's ruin, they called it. No roof, half a wall missing, a busted jaw of a porch." But Benji swore he'd been there in middle school and had never dared return after dark. "Total Halloween material," he insisted, eyes wide and glossy. "Locals swear it's cursed." They shared the legend while we climbed the last stretch of hill. 2 brothers in the 50s, one killed the other with a meat hook in the barn. The mother, finding the body, lit the kitchen on fire and stood in the middle of it. The murderer, the Hook brother, vanished. The weirdest part was the dog. A dog that stood outside the ruins and barked for 3 straight days after the fire, never moving, never eating until it was found with its tongue gone. I said nothing, accepting the story like a challenge. The warm, numb feeling was still firmly in place. The 20-minute walk up was a stumbling mess of exposed roots and snagging branches. The air grew immediately colder, sharper, a contrast to the heat in my chest. We slipped through a break in the falling down fence, a pathetic barrier held together by plastic hangers and rusty wire. The house was worse than Benji described. It was a charred, sagging monument. The roof was skeletal and the porch indeed looked like a busted jaw. The siding curled off the frame like it was desperate to escape. Benji kicked a side door hard until it groaned open, releasing a cloud of air thick with wet dust, metal, and a sour undercurrent that I couldn't place, like old grease in something forgotten. Inside, the floor slanted. The walls were covered in big square tin panels, bent and scorched. And they were decorated. Not just peeling wallpaper but hundreds of knots and bindings. Black thread, tiny bird bones, shattered glass shards, and even a couple of yellowed human teeth were tied to the panels. It looked like someone had been trying to make macabre wind chimes. But there was no wind and they still rattled sometimes. We navigated the debris. In the back, the roof had completely collapsed, creating a gaping hole where the wall used to be, exposing the tangled, chaotic woods beyond. This was the room everyone avoided. Emery muttered, "That's where the Hook came through." Benji, needing to prove his courage, turned to me. "You're the skeptic, right? The one who doesn't believe? Go sit in there. 5 minutes. Emery, time him." Emery, silent, reluctantly handed me her phone. I stepped into the collapse room. The floor was soft, spongy under my boots. I sat on a rotted plank near the center, facing the raw, open wall where the vines dangled like ropes. The others stayed in the doorway, their silhouettes blocking the weak flashlight beams. The first minute was quiet. Then the sound began, a faint, slow scratching like someone dragging a key across metal. Too slow for a mouse. Too intentional. My skin prickled. That's when the smell hit. Overriding the rot and dust was something sweet. Rotten sugar. Sickly, heavy, like 1,000 pieces of forgotten Halloween candy had liquefied and spoiled. I looked up at the skeletal top beam. Something flickered, liquid and dark, sliding across the wood. It was movement so fast and peripheral I couldn't be sure if I saw it or if my eye created the shape. Then came the whistling. One long, broken note. Air pushed slowly through teeth, devoid of melody. The whistling stopped and the scratching resumed. Benji's group was frozen in the doorway. I heard Benji fumbling with something in his coat. Then came the clink of metal hitting the rotten floor. The scratching and the whistling stopped instantly. Total, pressurized silence. Then, from the darkness of the hallway, a slow, deliberate walking began. We ducked behind the broken dresser in the adjacent room. The footsteps were slow, measured, accompanied by a dragging scrape, the sound of a coat or long appendage on wood. Something passed the doorway, a tall, thin figure in a long brown coat that swept the floor. One shoulder was higher than the other and his neck was wrapped in something thick and pale, rope or gauze. He walked right past us and into the room with the abandoned chair. The door creaked shut behind him. Ellis stood up instantly. Bree hissed a warning but he ignored it, pushing the door open, his flashlight cutting through the dust. He froze. The man was gone. The hoodie was gone. In its place, sitting neatly on the bare wooden seat of the chair, was Ellis's pocket knife. We ran. We didn't shout. We didn't look back. We sprinted down the slope, through the trees, the fear tasting like metal and rotten sugar in my throat. We didn't stop until we hit the familiar glow of the gas station sign. When we got back to Emery's house, the entire structure was lit up like a theater. Every bulb on, from the porch to the bathroom, even the attic crawl space that had no ladder. Emery's father was supposed to be gone until morning. We stayed on the neighbor's porch, unable to enter her brightly lit, terrified home. The next morning we made a pact. Silence. No one was to speak of the man in the brown coat or the knife. But the silence didn't work. The terror had followed us. The next night I was checking my trick-or-treat bag. There, sitting right on top of the candy, was Ellis's pocket knife. I threw it in the trash behind the hardware store, terrified of the exchange that had been made. That week, the nosebleeds started for Benji, Emery, and Lana. Sudden, heavy, messy bleeds. And Emery saw the dog from the legend with the gone tongue, standing at the edge of her school track field, staring. She knew it was the same one. The house had made a trade and now it was collecting more than just space. Ridge was my cousin, 6 months older and perpetually hungry for proof of the paranormal. He wasn't interested in simple spooks. He was an urban explorer, obsessed with boundary pushing. He had the gear, the GoPros, the high-powered flashlights, the maps pulled from the sketchiest corners of the web. I, on the other hand, was his unwilling anchor. I went along because I didn't trust his judgment, and I didn't want to get the call from his parents that his reckless curiosity had finally collapsed a rotten staircase beneath him. This Halloween, his target was the Holloway House, near the long-dead mining town of Grage. It was a busted-up Victorian, half-sunk into a hillside, barely clinging to the earth. The local lore was minimal, focusing on the sheer silence of the place. It was the kind of spot where things simply vanished. The drive took 3 hours, longer than it should have. Once we left the main highway, the roads became a chaotic mess of sharp turns and barely there gravel. My phone died miles out, the service dropping completely. Ridge, predictably, thought the lack of signal was hilarious, proof of the house's supernatural significance. We parked near a busted gate. The sun was already gone, swallowed by the Appalachian foothills. The quiet that descended was profound. No crickets, no wind rustling the brittle leaves, no sound of life at all. "They're waiting," Ridge whispered, strapping a GoPro to his chest. The hike down was steep. The house was nestled in a gulch, almost hidden by the topography, as if it had been forced into the earth. Its roof sagged like a broken crown, and the second floor looked like it had been hit by a bomb. Vines had clawed their way across the frame, not growing on the house, but through it. We circled to the side, navigating roots and rotten boards. Ridge, filming and narrating his usual, slightly obnoxious commentary, kicked the front door lightly. It didn't just open, it creaked with a long, agonizing groan that sounded more alive than any piece of dead wood should. Inside, the air was thick, damp, and overwhelmingly earthy, like the whole structure had absorbed the soil beneath it. It was cold, dry, and terrifyingly still. There was no smell of mold or rot, only a strange, neutral emptiness. Time didn't feel linear inside, it felt stretched and fuzzy at the edges. Ridge was loving it. He went deeper, narrating, iron stove circa 1900. Wallpaper peeling, likely residual energy. I hung back in the front room. I couldn't shake the feeling that the air was fuzzy, too heavy, almost pressurized. I kept expecting an animal to break the silence, but nothing moved. I just stood, absorbing the unsettling feeling that time wasn't moving the same way in there. Against my urgent warning, Ridge headed for the stairs. They looked impossibly brittle. "Be quick," I warned, watching him test the first step. He shrugged. "If I fall through, you can call 911. The stairs screamed under his weight. I stood at the base, flinching with every step. Then he stopped. Silence. "Hey, can you come here?" he called. His voice was flat, devoid of his usual swagger. That wasn't Ridge. I crept up the moaning staircase. The hallway above was dark, with 3 open doors. Ridge stood in the doorway on the right, his GoPro silent, his arms hanging at his sides. He looked small and strangely empty. I walked over and looked into the room. It was completely bare. No furniture, just wooden floorboards and a broken window where the wind sighed through. But one wall, the far wall, was covered. It was plastered with tiny black handprints. Hundreds of them. All different sizes, clustered together, looking like soot or dried ash or something darker. They weren't smeared. They were perfectly distinct, as if hundreds of tiny entities had pressed their hands against the wall in a desperate, silent plea. "Did you do that?" I asked, my voice a strained whisper. Ridge shook his head, his eyes glued to the prints. "Did you touch them?" He didn't answer. He just stared. I realized we hadn't run, we hadn't screamed. The house had demanded silence, and we had complied. We turned and left, retreating down the shrieking stairs and back out into the woods. We didn't speak the entire hike back to the car. Ridge stayed directly behind me, his usual joking commentary replaced by a deep, heavy silence. When we got to the car, he got in without a sound. It was halfway home, miles from the foothills, when the silence broke. Ridge began to whisper. Not to me, but to himself, a low, constant murmur. I thought it was his GoPro voiceover trick, but the camera was off. I looked over. He was staring intensely at the inner plastic of the passenger door. "Don't move," he whispered, his eyes wide and unfocused. "What?" "There's something in the car," he breathed. "It looks like the handprints." I slammed on the brakes. The gravel scattered, tires squealing. Ridge threw his door open and scrambled out, stumbling into the ditch. I followed, expecting a raccoon or a shadow, but the back seat was empty. There was nothing. Just our car idling and Ridge hyperventilating in the damp air. He finally explained, When he looked at the door, he saw small, pale smears on the plastic, barely visible, but they were the same shape as the handprints. He wouldn't get back in the car. He said he was walking 5 full miles, and I crawled behind him, hazards flashing, watching him walk away from the passenger seat, knowing he was right. Weeks passed, and Ridge refused to talk about the incident. He was withdrawn, pale, and wouldn't look at the footage. Then his mother called me. Ridge was missing. He came back late, hours later, covered in mud and shaking violently. His room was destroyed. Mirrors shattered, the bed ripped apart, his camera gear scattered across the floor, broken. When his mother forced him to talk, he finally confessed. He went back to the Holloway house. He said the handprints were still there, but this time they were fresh, wet, and multiplying. Every time he turned around, a new one had appeared. His phone, his GoPro, his flashlight, all electronics died the moment he needed them. Then in the hallway he saw it. Something crouched, long arms bent wrong, too tall for the space. It had no face, just a smear like a mouth that someone had tried to erase. It didn't move or make a sound. It simply watched him. He told the creature he was sorry. He ran. He left the house and never went back. Ridge doesn't film anymore. He doesn't own a camera, and he won't drive near that part of the mountains. He was left with the print of the erased face, a permanent memory of the thing that was silent and hungry. That Halloween, the air in Cincinnati was bland, predictable. Jalen, my cousin, had managed to rent a house in eastern Kentucky, not just on the edge of the forest near Redwater, but utterly beyond the map. He found it on a shady Craigslist post, a glaring red flag I chose to ignore out of a need for escape. The rent was impossibly low, a price that made sense the moment I saw the place. The house was a structural joke. Sagging roof, cracked windows, a porch that looked like it wanted to lie down and die. It was primitive. No electricity, no plumbing, and the wood stove looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the last administration. But Jalen, embracing a corrosive irony, loved it. Cricor, he called it. Bear, glutu, norent caps. Freedom. He had this way of framing his terrible life choices as philosophical statements. He proudly showed me around. The non-working fridge was replaced by a cooler of beer buried in melting ice. He had a lopsided futon, a speaker, and enough weed to dull the senses. By the time it got dark, we were a few beers deep, our judgment softening pleasantly. "You ever heard of the Corman House?" He grinned, handing me the flashlight. "Just up the hill. Mining family died or disappeared or something. Locals won't go near it. Total Halloween material." I gave him the standard no look, but I was buzzed, and Jalen was a bulldozer. He was already pulling on his boots. I knew if I stayed, I'd spend the night staring at the ceiling, wondering. If I went, at least I'd be moving. We set out around 9 p.m. The path behind his rental was barely a thinning in the trees, and the deeper we went, the colder the air became, not just temperature but an internal cold that felt sharp. 30 minutes in, we saw it, the Corman House. 2 stories, leaning hard to the left, the porch sinking into the dirt. It looked worse than a ruin, it looked like something actively suffering. Jalen shouldered the side door open. It groaned like an ancient hinge waking up. The smell hit immediately, wet dust, stale metal, and a sour, cloying undertone, like old grease and something forgotten. Every step made the floorboards complain, popping and flexing beneath our weight. Upstairs, the air was heavier, pressing down on us. Then we heard it, a dull thud from the next room over. Not a crash, more like a heavy bag landing on the floor. "Wind," Jalen whispered, turning to me with a raised eyebrow. The hallway ahead was tight and dark. At the end, a door hung open halfway. Jalen went straight to it, pushing it open. His flashlight beam cut through thick, suspended dust. The room had been a child's. Faded cartoon wallpaper clung in peeling strips, and a rusted bed frame sat in the center. That's when I saw them. On the far wall, just above the window, were 4 deep, parallel gouges. They were almost perfectly straight but unevenly long, too wide for any animal, too deliberate for accidental damage. They looked like the result of extreme, controlled violence. "I don't think we should be here," I murmured. Jalen ignored me. He was staring at the bed frame. "There's something on it," he whispered. I forced myself to look. Curled up neatly in the center of the springs was a fawn. Its legs were folded under it at impossible angles, carefully posed. There was no blood, no wound, no struggle. It looked clean. But it was the head that stopped my heart. Where the eyes, snout, and mouth should have been, there was only smooth fur. The skin was stretched tight across the skull, completely seamless, as if the face had been sealed shut at birth or simply erased. It didn't look dead, it looked unmade. I couldn't move. Jalen whispered a horrified, "What the hell?" Then the floor creaked downstairs once, then again, then a third time. The sounds were slow, heavy, and deliberate, moving steadily toward the stairs. Jalen's hand shot out, turning off the flashlight. We were instantly swallowed by darkness. The only sound was our breathing, fast, tight, and painfully loud. Another creak, now on the stairs. Jalen grabbed my wrist. "We go now." We backed out slowly, then sprinted toward the top of the staircase. I turned just for a second. Was there, standing at the top of the stairs, too tall for the hallway frame, hunchbacked, with long arms that dragged against the walls. Its silhouette was wrong, alien. Then it tilted its head slightly and I saw its face, or the lack of one. Smooth, pale, stretched canvas over raw muscle. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. It shimmered in the low light like plastic pulled taut over something trying to burst out. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It simply was. Jalen shoved me. I didn't feel my legs moving. We just ran, taking the stairs two at a time, bursting out the front door and down the slope. We didn't check for trails or look back. Branches slapped our arms, lungs burning, running on pure, primal terror. We didn't stop until we saw the faint glow of the porch light at his rental, a light I could have sworn was not on when we left. We stumbled inside, slammed the door, and shoved the couch against it. We sat on the floor, panting, listening to the silence. Neither of us slept. The next morning, the silence was broken. We drove to the nearest gas station. We made a mutual, unspoken agreement: never speak of the house or the deer again. But the terror wasn't over. That week, Jalen discovered his favorite possessions. A unique speaker, a cherished book, had been subtly unmade. They weren't broken, but their specific identity had been removed. The speaker no longer worked, the book's pages were blank white, yet still bound. He realized the creature at the top of the stairs, the unmade man, didn't kill, it sealed. It erased the life force, the specific detail of a person or object, leaving the shell behind. The deer was not killed. Its face, its voice, its expression, its life, had been meticulously sealed off. Jalen understood that the creature's final, slow purpose was to seal him next,